Can you tell us a little bit about the guns that are being banned? Are they a threat to society?
Well, first of all, in Canada, we don't, actual assault rifles, full auto capability, have been banned since 1978. So, what they talk about as assault style rifle, by definition, is if something is styled after something, it isn't that thing it's styled after. Because there isn't an actual buyback program yet, the government hasn't developed it, yet our guns are banned and we can't use them.
Natasha Biase for Rebel News. I'm here in Mississauga with Catherine Krozonouski at the Toronto Sportsman Show to check things out and interview Tracey Wilson of the CCFR. Stay tuned. So, can you tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Tracey Wilson, and I'm Vice President of Public Relations for the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. We're a national firearms advocacy group that holds the government to account for their failure to address actual crime and violence, while at the same time we advocate for fair and effective legislation for Canadian gun owners.
Amazing. And can you tell us a little bit about this event that we're at today?
Yeah, so this is the Toronto Sportsman Show. It's been canceled for a couple of years due to COVID and the fallout from that. So it's very exciting to get back here. But it's a huge show. It's kilometers long, and it's all people invested in enjoying the great outdoors, whether it's hunting, fishing, boating, archery, all kinds of stuff. And of course, guns, because it's a big part of Canadian culture and the outdoor sports.
Right. And can you tell us a bit about the buyback program that Trudeau is implementing?
Well, so back May 1st of 2020, the Liberal government decided to invest billions of our tax dollars in an attempt to confiscate legal guns from licensed Canadian gun owners as a political tool to pretend that he was doing something to reduce crime. Now, we've owned these guns for decades legally and without issue. So to see our tax dollars being wasted and billions of it on something like this is incredibly devastating to our community. And it's also damaging to Canadian culture, because when you want to take something away from somebody, it has to be with reason, and it's got to be within reason. Of course, this is an unreasonable measure. It's not going to have a positive impact on public safety, and gun owners don't deserve it.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit about the guns that are being banned? Are they a threat to society?
Well, first of all, in Canada, we don't, actual assault rifles, full auto capability, have been banned since 1978. So what they talk about as assault style rifle, by definition, is if something is styled after something, it isn't that thing it's styled after. So these are regular sporting and hunting firearms that we've owned for decades, semi-automatic only, and a maximum capacity of usually 5 rounds. Like an AR-15 in Canada only has an ability to hold 5 rounds. So, a gun in the wrong hands, of course, any gun would be dangerous in the wrong hands. But in the hands of legal licensed Canadian sport shooters, we know we don't represent a disproportionate risk to public safety. And this is purely political, and it's political theater for the Trudeau government.
What does this buyback program mean for women?
Well, the Liberal government and their anti-gun pet groups always sort of talk about this gun ban and the ensuing buyback program that's related to it as a measure to keep women safe. But as a woman and a firearms owner, I know that I'm not exempt from that gun ban. They are also confiscating firearms from Canadian female sport shooters and hunters. So for women, it just goes to show that a government that professes to want to protect you is at the same time damaging you. So for women, it's dangerous. And I think that the investments that they're going to be making with our tax dollars in the buyback program would be better allocated to programs to keep women safe, for interventions for women and their children to help escape abusive situations. There's a lot more we can do with billions of dollars than buy guns out of the gun safes of Canadian gun owners.
Yeah, Nat and I were actually talking about that on our way here. We were saying, all this money could be used to prevention and research into how these domestic situations escalate to gun violence, because obviously the first act that a man is going to take against a woman is probably not shoot her. There's
That's right.
a bunch of red flag warning signs that we could be investigating before we get to just taking everyone's guns away. So that money could be better used, maybe.
I'm going to give you a little piece of information as well. The government's own information on Stats Canada shows that less than 1% of all domestic violence calls in Canada even have a gun at the address, let alone used or threatened in any way.
And are those legal guns?
Yes, but less than 1% of all domestic calls. So guns and domestic violence isn't it's an issue, and we shouldn't disregard it. But the measures that we take to address it should be appropriate to the actual issue.
And so you said they're at the address, meaning they might not have even been
Right.
involved.
Yeah, like if I got in a fight with my husband and a neighbor called the police as a safety concern, that would be marked down as a domestic dispute. Just because I'm a gun owner, the guns may have nothing to do with the dispute, but because there's guns at that address, it would be marked down. So how big is the real problem? And like I said, I think we can do a lot more to protect women and children by investing that money differently than wasting it on a political gun ban.
Yeah. Wow. Well put.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do you think that, I mean, you kind of already touched on this, but do you think that this gun buyback program will minimize violence against women?
Well, no. I mean, that's a problem. It isn't licensed Canadian sport shooters and hunters that are the demographic that you generally see in domestic violence disputes. Should women be safe from gun violence? Of course. But at the same time, we've got to start investing in the root causes. Like you said, there are always a lot of red flags and signals ahead of time. This pandemic alone has seen an increase in domestic violence because people are locked up in their homes. They don't have the same resources and avenues to go out and find help. So before we start doing this extreme, expensive, ridiculous measure, I would like to see proper investments made in helping protect women and their children and studying the actual problem.
Yeah, it reminds me of, Australia and New Zealand who have also done programs like this. And this is kind of off topic, but they had the worst lockdowns in the world. What advice do you have for legal gun owners as it pertains to protecting their rights moving forward?
The number one thing Canadian gun owners can do to protect their ability to own firearms and to protect the future for their children to be able to enjoy our good, clean Canadian gun culture is to join the CCFR. That is the number one thing you can do to protect your rights. We've got the largest, most complex court challenge against the gun ban in federal court right now. We've seen a couple of wins recently. Just this week, we got an extension on the amnesty, so that buys us another year and a half. In politics, a year and a half is a lifetime. A lot can happen in that time.
What's the amnesty for, if you don't mind me?
The amnesty is because there isn't an actual buyback program yet. The government hasn't developed it, yet our guns are banned and we can't use them. We are forced to actually keep them. There is nothing else we can do with them at this time. So although they're banned, we are forced to keep them by the government. So we have an amnesty that protects us.
So technically you're breaking the law, so they're giving you amnesty against that.
Right. And it was to end actually at the end of April. But of course, 2 years later,
And you had to fight for that.
Yeah. And 2 years later, the government still has no clue how to even confiscate our guns from us. So they've extended it another year and a half, which is good for us. We are fighting them in court. We could have an election by then. What we need is a political solution. And at the same time, hopefully we can get a government that's going to focus on reducing crime and violence and saving Canadian lives.
Okay. Do you want to show us that calendar that you were showing us
Yeah.
before? This is super cool. So you guys are the only group that does anything like this, right?
Yeah, so the CCFR is very unique because we're the only national firearms advocacy organization that has a women's program. And the idea was we got together, and there's a lot of women in the leadership of the CCFR. And I said, I know there's soccer moms and average ladies all across the country who, their only exposure to firearms would be maybe either through violence or through Hollywood or media or depicted badly by politicians. Every gun owner knows the very best way to influence someone's ideas about gun ownership is to take them to the range. But taking 80 or 100 women to the range every weekend costs a lot of money. So we had to come up with a fundraiser targeted specifically for women, by women. And we got together. These are all women of the CCFR. They're members, they're on the leadership team, they're volunteers. We get together, we do a retreat weekend, we dress them up like rock stars, we hire professional photographers, we produce a beautiful calendar, and the proceeds from the sale of this calendar goes directly back into the women's program to fund range days. We've put over 4,000 Canadian women through the program so far, and every year it's growing. So average girls doing extraordinary things to promote the sport to other women.
So Natasha and I walked around the Toronto Sportsman Show today. We talked to a bunch of people. We looked at some really big rope, a couple of really cool guns, and most importantly, we talked to Tracey Wilson from the CCFR. She taught us a lot, and it was really interesting. But if you want to learn something, maybe you should check out Nat and my show called Misunderstood, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Rebel News Plus. You can subscribe to watch the show when it comes out. If you can't afford to subscribe right now, that's okay. You can still watch the episode a week later, and you can always listen to the audio on all of your favorite streaming platforms. For Rebel News, I'm Kat, and Nat is just behind the camera.